LinkedIn presents.
Welcome to the Human Capital Innovations Podcast. We're your source for personal, professional, and organizational growth and development, where we share original research, explore industry trends, and interview executives and thought leaders from across the globe. We hope you join us often for practitioner-oriented content around all things related to leadership, HR, talent management, organizational development, and change management. Maximize your personal and organizational potential with Human Capital Innovations Podcast. Do you enjoy the Human Capital Innovations Podcast? Enjoy ad-free listening by going to the Patreon page, and please consider contributing even at the producer or sponsorship level. And please leave a review. Thank you for your support. Welcome to the Human Capital Innovations Podcast. In this HCI Podcast episode, I talk with Joshua Motta about curating a healthy organizational culture. Joshua Motta, welcome to the Human Capital Innovations Podcast.
It's great to be here.
Yeah, thank you. It's a pleasure to be with you. You're joining us from LA. I'm south of Salt Lake City in Utah. And today we're going to be talking about organizational culture generally, but more specifically, we're going to zoom in and talk about curating a healthy organizational culture, what leaders can do to really facilitate that. As we get started, I wanted to share Josh's bio with everybody. Joshua Motta is CEO and co-founder of Coalition, which combines cybersecurity and insurance to help organizations prevent digital risk before it strikes. Founded in 2017, Joshua and co-founder John Herring built Coalition with a mission to solve cyber risk and provide security for all. The company now serves over 160,000 customers globally and is proud to be named to Inc.'s Best Places to Work in 2021 and to Fast Company's Most Innovative Companies in 2022. And I could go on, but I'm going to pause there. Josh, anything else that you would like to highlight for me or the audience by way of your background, your personal context, or about Coalition before we dive on into the conversation today?
Yeah, I mean, look, for me, Coalition is sort of the manifestation, I think, of my entire career to some degree. So it's, I tell people it's what would happen if you combined a financial service with a technology company and sort of an intelligence community mindset when it comes to data collection and analysis. And that is very befitting to my background, which I'm happy to go deeper into.
So 2021, 2022, you're getting recognized. You're clearly doing some cool stuff. I think that connects directly back to our topic for today around curating a healthy organizational culture. So with your company as a bit of a case study, what are some of the things you've been doing to be more innovative, to be one of those premier best places to work where you're attracting and retaining the best people?
Yeah, look, I mean, the recognitions are, of course, the outputs of many of the inputs and decisions that we've made since the company was founded. And so, believe it or not, we founded the company in 2017. The first written document ever in the wiki was not our business plan, although we do have an 80-page one that was later developed. It was a culture document, and it really set out the parameters of these are the values that we want people on the team to uphold. It wasn't so much like the corporation's, values. It was really more like these are the values that we want the individual people to embody, because we believe that high-performing teams are made up of individuals who hold these values. And so, it took us a number of years before we were recognized, either as one of the best places to work or one of the most innovative companies. But I think everything is a byproduct of those decisions we made very early on in the company's history.
Yeah. And what were some of those cultural elements that you highlighted in that very first document when you were talking about those core values? What for you and your founder, John, what really was the foundational piece that you were trying to communicate to other members of your team as you started to build and scale?
Yeah, I mean, we wanted to let people know that we were going to be deliberate about it, for one. So I think in the culture document, we wrote, we are building a culture, an identity, an ethos, a belief system if you will, and a collective passion and purpose for all that we do. And we literally laid out that this is exactly how we intend to build the organization. Some of those, were character, like that was a value that we, that was important to us, like that we sweep the sheds, right? We're never too big to do the small things that need to be done. We can balance pride with humility, absolute pride in the performance of the company, which is, I think, one of the reasons why you saw years later the recognition, but total humility before the magnitude of the task ahead of us. Humility was another one. Like we're not afraid to ask questions. Like we wanted to build a culture of asking and re-asking fundamental questions, which we thought would cut away, unhelpful beliefs that would give us sort of clarity of execution, and really like the humility to ask a simple question, which is, can we do this better? Which is something that, when you do daily for years, it's magical what happens. Another important one, was purpose. We always felt that the more we have to play for, the better we play. And, we were clear that we're all here to build something we believe in, to make a company that will last. There was sort of a bit of an adage that we wrote down. I think it was, the person with a narrow vision sees a narrow horizon, and the person with a wide vision sees a wide horizon. That's what we wanted to do, right? Martin Luther King didn't give he gave the "I have a dream" speech, not the "I have a plan" speech. And so, that mission of solving cyber risk, of security for all, it's a big mission, right? But every day we go to work, every meeting that bores us, everything we do just for money or obligation, all the time we kill, like we're literally giving our lives for it. And so it needs to be worthwhile. Like that was a big, important one. So those are just a handful. There's probably 6 in total, that we laid out. And at the end of the day, look, culture isn't what you write in a document, it's what you practice. And so we also tried to incorporate various rituals, if you will, into our just day-to-day activities that sort of reinforced these values, right? And recognized people who demonstrated them.
Yeah, and that point is really, really important. So absolutely signaling to your people from the inception that you're going to be deliberate about this. That's awesome. I mean, that's something, regardless of whether, 6 years later, you look back and you're like, oh, I still agree with everything we put down there, whether you do or not. The fact that you did it, and you did it in a deliberate way, in a purpose-driven way, signals a lot to people that it matters. And then you're working to actually integrate it in to various aspects of the business. So you just mentioned, performance management and goals and expectations and how people are going to be evaluated, that kind of stuff. That's really important. And in so many organizations, they have all these espoused values that look great on paper on the website. When it comes down to where the rubber meets the road and how people are going to be compensated or given bonuses and the way the structures are set up, it undermines those very values. Of course, you're going to see conflict there. You're going to see at a minimum, you're going to see some rub and some discord, but it can actually really drastically undermine the type of culture you're going for and give you something totally different. And so what you're describing, I think, is great. You're laying the foundation, you're being deliberate, you're having the conversations, you're integrating it into the various aspects of the business. So it's not a name only, but it's truly like you're walking the walk. All of that's wonderful. And as I was framing up the beginning of the episode, in the introduction, I talked about curating a healthy organizational culture. Some of that comes back to what you were just saying. I'm curious, though, that word curate, that's something I really like that term in a way of kind of framing this up. What were some of those different elements that you're trying to curate and bring together and provide for your teams as you're trying to create that psychologically safe culture, that healthy organizational culture where everyone can, bring their whole authentic self to the workplace, where they can, everyone feels needed, wanted, valued, with an opportunity to contribute in meaningful ways, where all of those sorts of healthy things are happening?
Yeah. I mean, part of the curation strategy just involved, basic arithmetic. And that was the belief that if we more than doubled the size of the company in a given year, that would be something that would be almost certain to derail the culture we were trying to build. And why? Because, over half of the team would have been with us for less than a year. And, a year is maybe a little bit of an arbitrary marker to, determine when you're bleeding coalition blue or whatnot. And, but of course, you've vested in our company, like you own equity, you've made the decision that you're committed to this. And we always wanted sort of that group to be the dominant group in the company. So just not growing faster than that, like putting arbitrary brakes on things to some degree was important in that curation strategy. In terms of other things that we did to try and curate, it was again like building it into the orientation, building those rituals into our company culture. Every team meeting, at the end of it, we would recognize someone for sweeping the sheds, and or the floors, as we called it at the time, and whoever received that award would pass it on the next week. And it then evolved into sort of a company talent contest where there were haikus and raps and music videos of the one person handing it on to the other. But I think it really built, it really helped us curate, exactly how culture was received and incorporated into the team.
Yeah, fantastic. And I'm curious too. So you've been telling us a little bit about Coalition, but prior to Coalition, you worked for Microsoft, the CIA. How did some of those early experiences shape you and inform your approach to leadership and culture building that you then took with you as you were a co-founder at Coalition?
Yeah, I mean, I would say I took different things from different places where I worked, and perhaps the CIA, maybe most obviously, it was all about purpose, right? I think it's hard to replicate like the mission-driven, purpose-driven environment. You have, an incredibly talented group of people who could all make far more money in the private sector than they do working in government. But they choose that decision because it gives them purpose. It gives their lives meaning, and we felt like we were helping people every day. Hard to replicate that, right? And so what I learned from there is, if we want to attract the best people, which is ultimately the core asset of our company, of any modern, digital company, if you will, we have to give them purpose. We can attract much better people if they can get behind the purpose of the company. So that's definitely one of the things I took away from CIA. Of course, Microsoft, like I was there at the .com boom. It was an incredibly exciting place to be. Also a lot of purpose, but in a different way, right? Like it gave people who just were fascinated by technology. The internet had fully arrived. It was the .com boom. And, if you were a technologist, like that was an exciting place to be. Microsoft just created that environment. I should also mention that, they hired me when I was, 14. I think I was 15 when I walked through the doors. And so for a very large corporation to take such a risk on someone so young, I had enough self-awareness to know that in and of itself was rather extraordinary. And so I think that, that's given me an interesting perspective to, never underestimate the people who show up and raise their hands and say that they want to be part of Coalition, they want to be part of the mission. Lest I have a pot calling the kettle black moment, I can hardly turn away, the smart, exciting, interested 14, 15, 16 plus year old or whomever, that has a passion for what we're doing. So, that entrepreneurial spirit, that's something that, Microsoft was great at attracting. That's something that I think we've tried to attract. So there's a lot of entrepreneurs that are within Coalition.
Well, that's interesting. You must be a very talented and skilled person to be hired at Microsoft at that age.
Or lucky. That might be the other attribute.
Yeah. Well, so it's interesting though, because how many organizations really just arbitrarily cut off huge segments of the potential labor market, people that could work for them and add value to the organization. And in your case, it's because you were really young. But yeah. In some cases it's age on the young side. Sometimes it's age on the older side. Now, of course, there are laws against age discrimination, but we know it happens all the time, especially in certain sectors. And so organizations, come up with other reasons, but age is often a driving factor, in many organizations. And so we have all these arbitrary things and these biases that shape the way,
that's right.
Yeah, the biases that shape the way we view someone's ability to contribute. Another one that it kind of irks me, it's irked me for a long, long time, is, when you look at a job posting and you just see arbitrary years of experience. We want 10 years of experience doing XYZ. I'm like, that doesn't mean anything. Like, someone could have 10 years of crappy experience, and that doesn't make them more qualified than someone who has 1 year but is passionate and ready to learn and roll up their sleeves, right?
Yeah.
And so it's really interesting to see how different organizations approach these things. And I think if you want to be a best place to work, if you want to be an innovative company, you got to peel back the layers of bias and look at what really matters. And that is someone's ability to contribute. And that shouldn't matter about, all the different things: race, gender, ethnicity, sexual orientation, age, all the things. All those things shouldn't matter. It's like, how can someone contribute? And if we're really truly looking for someone's ability to contribute and allow them the chance to do that in a healthy way, then it's a win for them. It's a win for us. I know that's a simple idea, and probably most people would agree with it verbally. The problem is, in practice and structurally, the way a lot of organizations run, it just doesn't happen.
Yeah, I mean, I think certainly one of the advantages I've had is being able to sort of live that, like in my own way, shape, or form. And ironically, in a startup, oftentimes those years of experience that other people have, whether they're great or not, they're not healthy, right? I mean, if definitionally we're trying to do something different, the bias of anyone who has years and years of experience is to do things the same way that they always have. And so ironically, like in a startup environment, you oftentimes want to hire the people that have never done the thing. You just want people who have a bias for action and who really care about the purpose of the company. If you have those two things together, like someone's passionate about what they're doing, they want to act, they're going to contribute. And I can take another example, right? Where, look, today I run a fairly large insurance company. I've never worked in an insurance company in my life prior to founding one. Why did I get into the industry? It was ultimately because I wanted to solve a problem, right? Like, I didn't believe that cybersecurity was going to be exclusively solved by, more mousetraps and technology, widgets and whatnot. Like, those things could all be very helpful. And there's lots of great people building great cybersecurity companies to protect organizations. But at the end of the day, it's a risk management problem. You can't eliminate cyber risk, but you can eliminate the cost of it by insuring it or transferring it to an insurance company. And I knew that was a critical piece that just wasn't, fulfilling its promise. And so I'm like, look, I'm going to go set up an insurance company. Like, what right did I have to do that? None whatsoever. And so I kind of remind myself of my own experiences, and we've got to overlay that with how we think about attracting talent. And, from the top down, it's like, no, more years of experience doesn't always mean, a better outcome here. Like, if we want to think differently, these are the real traits that we have to look for, irrespective of, like you said, what someone's age is, what background they had, et cetera.
Another interesting thing, I know at Coalition, this is something you dealt with, and I suspect you have ideas about this more generally too. Having this robust organizational culture is hard enough to do when you're together in person, but we just went through, 3 years of a COVID environment, the attitudes that many employees and workers have around how work is designed and where and when they work has shifted. So now there's more of a work from anywhere mentality. To what extent have you leaned into that, and how have you maintained and really sustained a robust organizational culture in this current work from anywhere era and environment?
Yeah, well, look, it's certainly not because we had a functioning crystal ball, but we had the advantage of being a remote first company since the day it was founded, which was in 2017. So several years ahead of COVID and the forced kind of move to remote. Now, remote first didn't mean everyone worked from home.
Right.
It just meant that it had to be an amazing experience for people to work from their home, because that was the lowest common denominator. Like, if those people had a great experience and could contribute to the mission in a meaningful way, anyone in an office could clearly do that. And then we just let people kind of choose, where they wanted to work from. We had a lot of employees in San Francisco. The apartment sizes, not as big as in the parts of the Midwest and other parts of the country where, we had other members of our team. And so some of those people wanted to come into an office, right, to just be able to get out and escape, the home life or whatnot. So we've always maintained a number of offices. We've always let people even who work in an area where we don't have an office, go into a WeWork or something like that.
Mm-hmm.
But the vast majority of our employees, including present company here today from my home in Los Angeles, we work remotely. And so we had the advantage of building in the infrastructure, the operational processes, the culture, the battle rhythm, if you will, of coordinating across, geographies, including international geographies from very early on. So when COVID happened, it wasn't really a change of pace in terms of how the company, changed its operations. And we've stayed that way to this very day. And it's something that's allowed us to just attract talent that we otherwise wouldn't have been able to attract. The best people in the world are not all in the same geographic location, it turns out. Surprise, surprise. And many of them have very good and legitimate reasons for wanting to be where they are. So, if we can create an environment where they can thrive, then that's advantageous to us. We've been committed to sort of a remote work culture from the beginning, and it's again helped with that talent attraction. The most people, again, are the most important part of our business.
As I talk to a lot of different leaders, there's a lot of different attitudes about remote work, hybrid work, having distributed teams versus being, in a particular geographic location, coming into the office. And there's, currently there's a lot of people pushing for more and more people to come back to the office. There's a lot of articles out there about the importance of being in person. There's articles, and there's lots of work and industry reports about organizational culture and how it's strained and how it doesn't work as well when you're remote and distributed. And I look at all of that, and I'm an organizational development, change management, leadership guy. That's my area of research and what I teach and what I consult on. And so I look at these arguments and I'm like, yeah, I mean, on one aspect, there's some truth there. Not all experiencers are created equal, though, and you can have amazing distributed remote teams that have an amazing culture, and you can have face-to-face teams that have a terrible culture. So it's not there. I don't think there's necessarily anything magical about being together in person. It can make it easier to create and sustain a culture when you're doing it purposefully and mindfully. When you're in person and you have more organic opportunities to interact with people, it can happen easier, but it doesn't mean it happens automatically, and it doesn't always happen better. And so it's interesting to hear you talk about how Coalition has gone about doing this, how you've always been a remote first company, how you've always made sure that you've put those who are working remotely, as top priority in terms of employee experience. And I think those types of things really matter. I'm also wondering if there's been specific leadership strategies that you and your co-founder and others on your executive team have used to try to implement and support this sort of a culture, especially when you're in a more remote first kind of an environment.
Yeah, I mean, I guess I would say, to what you said, it's like there are many paths to nirvana, right? Is the way I think about it. I don't think it's relevant or even logical to think that there's like one way in which every organization should do things. So, I think the debate over in office or or remote is just distracting and a bit irrelevant, and this for us, it kind of goes back to a cultural value that we have, again, one of those 6, which is authenticity, right? Like in 2 words, it's know thyself. That is inscribed on the inner chamber of the Luxor temple, and it's equally been inscribed in our culture. And that's that, like, look, we refuse to be distracted by the clamor of whatever other people are doing around us. We refuse to be trapped by dogma of like, it has to be done this way and only this way. We have the courage to follow our heart and intuition. And so, there are segments of coalition of our team that do come to the office every day, right? Where that's advantageous to them. That's advantageous to the business. And, we're not dogmatic about it as a company. We just want to optimize the intersection between the employee work experience and obviously the business and the mission achievement, because ultimately the success of our business is highly levered and attached to the success of our mission. And so that's we're trying to find that like efficient frontier, if you will. And it's never perfect. And, sometimes it involves making sacrifices and trade-offs, but, that's how we talk about it as a team. And look, we're not afraid to relitigate it. We really have to have the courage to follow our heart and intuition. And so at the end of the day, that means that, individual leaders are making decisions as to what is optimal for both the employee experience and for achieving our mission, which is tied to, of course, achieving our business result. So that's really how we've gone about, thinking about the remote versus in-office experience.
Well, Josh, this has been a great conversation. I know at the time I'm going to have to let you go here in just a minute, but before we wrap things up for today, I wanted to give you a chance to share with the audience how they can connect with you, find out more about your work, your team, and then give us the final word on the topic for today.
Yeah, of course. You can hit Coalition up on our website, coalitioninc.com. We are on Twitter as Solve Cyber Risk. You can hit me personally. I'm just at Joshua Motta on Twitter, or Joshua at coalitioninc.com. In terms of final sort of word, for when it comes to company building, we think there's 3 ingredients. It's easier than baking a cake. It's a good idea or ideas, and you got to keep coming up with them. It's capital and it's people. Once you have kind of those first 2, people is by far the hardest in that equation, which is why I think we overspend and in that area relative to some of our peers. That's just a lesson we've learned. And sometimes you need to know where to overspend. Just has always shocked me how little companies invest in talent development and whatnot. That's an area that we've gone heavy into.
Josh, thank you so much. It's been a real pleasure. I encourage the audience to reach out, get connected, find out more about what Joshua and his team can do for you. And as always, I hope everyone can stay healthy and safe, that you can find meaning and purpose at work each and every day. And I hope you all have a great week. If you enjoy the Human Capital Innovations podcast, enjoy ad-free listening by going to the Patreon page, and please consider contributing even at the producer or sponsorship level. And please leave a review. Thank you for your support. Thanks again for joining us for this episode of the Human Capital Innovations podcast. I hope you stay healthy and safe and that you have a great week.